Welcome to the latest installment in the science of our lives. No, This Week in Science, the podcast is broadcasting live right now, and we are so glad you are here to join us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the like button. Get those notifications. We want to see those hearts and likes come on up here, but we are ready to start the show. Are we not?
Yeah,
let's start it.
Okay, everybody's looking good, sounding good. What do they say? 5 by 5, Clive?
I don't know who they are. I don't know who they are that says that. I don't know anybody who says that.
Say it. Yes, Gord, we're having a science party right now. I would like you to know this is the live recording. The podcast may not include everything seen here.
Well, it wouldn't include anything seen here.
Heard here.
But yeah.
Included here.
Not to do an annoying correction on it or anything. Yeah.
We are beginning this show in
All right.
3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 880, recorded on Wednesday, August 18th. Is it the 18th today?
No.
It is where I am.
17th.
It's the 17th. Okay, so this is
where I am.
cut out. Thanks. It's the 17th for Justin, not for us yet.
No,
It's the 18th
right?
for Justin.
For Justin.
It's the 17th.
I was just and I don't want it to time travel forward into the future yet. I want to take that time.
That's actually the safest type of time travel, but okay.
Yeah. All right, starting again in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 880, recorded on Wednesday, August 17th, 2022. Will we return to the moon? Who knows the answer to some of these questions? I'm Dr. Kiki, and today we will fill your head with sleep, sneezes, and styrofoam. But first...
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Your mind is made up. It's made up of physical, biological, squishy stuff that came to be over millions of years of evolution, giving you the ability to process information from the world around you through your senses as it operates biological functions automatically. It's made up of thoughts, language, and memory, giving you the ability to wonder aloud and eventually find where you left your keys. And it's made up of interests, things your mind seeks out in the world beyond its squishy confines. While your mind is made up of many things, we recommend one more. Make your mind up with science. Like a highly refined sixth sense, science allows you to process information not readily available to senses alone. And there's no better place to make up your mind than here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. And apparently it is episode 888, even though I have decided we're going back in time again first. This episode.
Justin just said that's the kind of time travel you don't want to do.
No, that's the dangerous kind. Time travel forward, all you want. Going back's where all the paradoxy danger happens.
1 step forward, 2 steps back. No, we're going to move right on into our science for the day. I have some fun stories today. I'm going to be talking a bit about cancer, synthetic. What?
I got fun stuff to talk about today. Well, let's start off with cancer. Yeah,
Yep.
that's the...
Yep, that's what we're doing. Synthetic circuits, some styrofoam recycling, and is consciousness solved? And should we be thinking about free energy? Some big questions out there. Justin, what'd you bring?
I've got why heat makes you sleepy, especially if you're a fruit fly. Ancient DNA of South America. Finger tapping revulsion, and how deceptive food labeling could be countered.
Deceptive labeling with truth. No, let's hear that when we get to that story. Yeah, Blair.
Spoiler alert: Kiki just told how my story ends.
How about we just tell the truth? Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have sponges, spiders, and zebra finches.
Oh, I love zebra finches.
Yeah.
Meep, meep. Yep. I will be mimicking a zebra finch during that story.
Yes, it's actually zebra finch brains, so I brought it just for you. So you could basically do the story. I'm just
No, I couldn't, but I'm gonna love it so much.
And you're gonna, it's great.
It's gonna
I
be
was
great.
like, I gotta bring this.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that story, so I'm glad you did.
Yes.
Let's talk about those zebra finch brains later. But now we're going to move on into the show. And as we do, I want to remind everyone out there that if you are not yet subscribed, you can do that by looking for This Week in Science, all places that podcasts are found. You can find us on Twitch, on where else are we? YouTube and Facebook, broadcasting live weekly at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays, whether or not I get the episode number correct.
Mm-hmm.
And then
who really cares?
It's just about the science, not the
what
numbers.
Actual episode is it?
We
don't know.
I made it up a long time ago.
No, that's fantastic because
we've talked about this trivia before.
We've gotten to the point when we've lost track of where we are.
It's somewhere in the 800s or 900s.
It's an estimate.
Yeah.
And if you want to find us on the Twitch, the Instagram, or the Twitters, look for TWIS Science. Our website is twis.org. If this was a lot for your brain and you just want to go to our website and see our show notes and episodes and stuff and find links and information. twis.org. Okay. Science time. Let's dive into the science. What do we want to talk about first? How about the fact that NASA has successfully rolled its Artemis 1 mission craft, the Orion orbiter and the SLS, onto the launch pad earlier than expected. It's sitting there on the launch pad, hopefully getting ready to launch on a test mission, not manned, near the moon, which is pretty exciting if they actually can get this test mission to go for it.
I don't know though. A man on the moon. Yeah. A man on the moon, please.
Man.
Well, so far it couldn't possibly be done. Why are we?
Couldn't possibly. No.
Haven't we already done this before? I feel like deja vu.
It has been done before, but not in a very long time. It's very exciting if we can successfully manage this unmanned mission to the moon and back, because then we could take people to the moon. We could take new rovers to the moon. We could do lots of stuff on the moon. We could start building that moon base that we've been talking about. There's all sorts of research that could be done. I mean, let's become our own little human I guess it's not interplanetary, interplanetary body.
Interorbitary?
A United Federation of Planets, I think, is what you're looking for there.
Maybe that's what.
Yeah.
Yes. We could get there. Yes, but no sooner than August 29th will the launch take place from Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, Florida. And so we're just waiting now to see whether or not everything goes according to plan. Will we make it to space? Will we return to the moon? It's definitely yet to be seen. But moving on from the moon, we can take a little shift in our scientific focus, to curing cancer in
Yeah,
mice.
let's do it.
In mice, because as
Again?
we know, as we know, this is what we love to do: cure the cancer in the mices. In this particular situation, they are testing a new kind of cancer vaccine. It is similar to others that are in clinical trials currently, as it works similarly to COVID vaccines that were used by Pfizer and Moderna by delivering mRNA in little lipid molecules to fuse with cells that then read that mRNA and produce viral antigens, these little tiny segments of the virus that then can make the immune system reactive. Okay, we know there are many of these mRNA vaccines for not just SARS-CoV-2, HIV, and cancer in development. Like I mentioned just a second ago, cancer vaccines using mRNA are in clinical trials. However, so far, what they have seen is a limited turnover of the actual immune reactivity when the mRNA gets processed mainly through the liver. Now, the liver is a great immune body in our organ in our body, but the better location are our glands. The glands that swell up when you get sick.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the little sponges.
The
for
lymphatic system,
Yeah.
yes. And through the lymph glands, what if we can target the RNA to end up in those lymph glands, in the lymph system, that's where the immune cells are really doing the biggest work to prepare the body to fight something off. Maybe we could have a bigger reaction. And so these researchers at Tufts School of Engineering, they attempted this, and in their publication and Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences this week, they showed that it was extremely successful. And rather than have, as with the COVID vaccine, 1 to 4, where like the majority of the mRNA is ending up in the liver, they had 3 to 1, where the majority was ending up in the lymphatic system. And not only that, the mice that they treated with this particular mRNA vaccine for their cancer, for metastatic melanoma, they showed inhibition of tumors, 40% rate of complete response, no tumors at all, and no recurrence long term when it was paired with another therapy that helps prevent cancer cells from suppressing an immune response. So all the mice were in that ended up in complete remission, prevented any new tumors from forming after they were injected again with metastatic tumor cells. So the researchers were like, let's try really hard to give these mice cancer. And they didn't get it.
Nice.
So this is a stronger response. It's a very exciting platform for potentially not just cancer treatments moving forward, but also other viruses and pathogens that we might want to deal with. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So once again, in mice, but
In mice. Yeah, well, that's where we
Dot,
start.
in mice.
Yeah.
Exactly. But we'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
Cure the mice of all diseases so that one day they may live forever, replacing us on this planet.
They will. The mice and the cockroaches. We will have saved them.
But this is just real quick. We've talked about this already probably enough times on the show about how we used to like try to avoid talking about cancer, not because we didn't want to talk about cancer, but because it was always a thing that might lead to a thing to someday a pathway to finding an intervention, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
These are clinical trials that are curing cancer. And this is not the first one we've had this year alone. We've had, I think, several this year already.
Yeah.
Really an astounding time in in cancer
Yeah,
research.
it absolutely
They
is.
are.
You know what I was just thinking about too?
Yeah.
Pets. Cancer in pets is like a huge thing. Like, just
I guess
mean,
as we
Okay,
as
I mean,
pets live longer, and as we, these animals we love, I don't really think
Yeah.
about it.
yeah, I mean, obviously
huge-
humans are the number one priority. I get that, but I'm also just thinking about, okay, if we can cure cancer in mice, maybe
What
we can
about
cure
zoo
cancer in
animals?
our fuzzy buddies.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and if your pet is a mouse, you're way ahead of the game.
Truth.
There
Press
we go.
release on this next story caught my attention with the opening line. On the hottest summer days, you may find yourself dozing off in the middle of the day. That caught my eye because it's been especially warm in Denmark. It's 5:20 in the morning and I'm sweating. Like it's that, there's no air conditioning in this country. Like nobody has it. So it's been hot. And I did. In the middle of the day yesterday, I took a really long nap while it was really warm. And so I saw this headline. I was like, oh, well, why is that? So I took the long midday. Why was that? Northwestern University neurobiologists have found clues as to what might be happening. Their study, published in Current Biology, found that fruit flies are pre-programmed to take a nap in the middle of the day. Follow up to a 2020 biology paper that identified a brain thermometer, which was only active in cold weather. This paper explores a similar thermometer circuit for hot temperatures. This is quoting Marco Gallio, who's associate professor of neurobiology, and I think it's his lab that this is being conducted in. Changes in temperature have a strong effect on behavior of both humans and animals, and offers animals a cue that is time to adapt to the changing seasons. The effect of temperature on sleep can be quite extreme, with some animals deciding to sleep off an entire season. Think of a hibernating bear. But the specific brain circuits that mediate the interaction between temperature and sleep remain largely unmapped. So they're working with fruit flies because they said it's a good model. There's for the question of like, why do we sleep, or why does sleep, what does sleep do for the brain? Because they don't attempt to disrupt their own sleep instincts as do humans. No fruit flies drinking coffee to pull the odd all-nighter. They also allow researchers to isolate the influence of external cues like light and temperature on specific cellular pathways. So nice friendly model to work with. Just as they expected, based on the results of the previous paper on cold temperature, researchers found that brain neurons receiving information about heat are part of the broader system that regulates sleep. When the hot circuit, which runs parallel to the cold circuit, is active, the target cells that promote midday sleep stay on longer. This results in an increase of midday sleep that keeps flies away from the hottest part of the day. So, if you run one of the cultures that have that midday siesta, where you close up all the shops and everybody's just going to go take a nap.
I know. I was just going to ask, is this like, is this a genetic circuit in Italians as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, it might be. It might be generational, like growing up in warmer temperatures. You just sort of figure this out. But there must be a biological. But that graphic you have up there is showing that the fruit fly likes a good 25 degrees C, or was 77-ish Fahrenheit. And then if it's hotter than that, it triggers that response that starts saying, okay, well, these cells are going to stay on until you take a nap. The question
was that a guess, Justin? Because I just Googled it and that was exactly correct. 77.
Yeah. He lives in Denmark now.
Yeah, I'm in the Celsius. Everything's in the Celsius.
Right? Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm on the metric temperature system, which is actually completely different than Celsius. It's a whole other.
It makes more sense, like metric does.
But no, I've been looking it up for months, so I'm getting a little better at it. But the thing that I was looking at this, I go, gosh, there's times in the Central Valley where at night it doesn't cool off below that 25 C. So when When do those flies go out? Or are they just groggy? Like they just get off of shift work and they're foraging tired and picking the wrong thing to eat, wrong tree again. Oh, what am I doing? I'm so tired. Like, do they take the naps or do they just suffer in the heat? I don't know what they do. That's somebody else should do that paper.
They
What if
die.
you leave the temperature on? Yeah. But yeah, they're saying some parts of it could actually be a biological response, but they haven't found this circuit in humans yet. That's the next thing they want to start looking at is humans and see if they can define this sort of circuitry somewhere within humans that induces that midday sleep on the hot days.
Well, you don't want to waste energy when it's really hot, and you don't want to lose water when it's really hot. And exerting yourself does both of those things. So if you can just shut it all down
and chill.
Yeah, that is extremely beneficial.
Absolutely beneficial to your physiology, your survival, resource use, all those things.
Yeah.
For sure. Hey, Blair.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about sneezes now? We've
Yeah.
got hot
Yeah.
weather survival and sneezes.
Why do we sneeze?
Because we have...
Oh yeah, I don't know, because there's. Have you ever seen a pollen or the dust close up? They're all spiky and evil looking, and then you get in there and
so
it
that's
touches your nose, and you're like, get out
to
of here.
get stuff out of our noses.
Yes,
exactly.
So itchiness or pollen might cause us to sneeze, but the reason us humans can sneeze is to expel stuff from our nose, it's to expel waste, essentially. Sponges sneeze also. Some of the most rudimentary animals in the world, simple animals, simplistic body design, whatever you want to say, it all sounds derogatory, but they're basically just a living tube that lives in the ocean. And I love them, don't get me wrong. But it appears that they also sneeze to expel waste. Field experts have known about this kind of sneezing behavior for years, but they have not known the exact mechanism or the exact reason for this behavior. And so this recent paper that came out in Current Biology looks at it as a method to get rid of materials the sponges cannot use. Now, to be clear, sponge sneezes are not like our sneezes. They take about a half an hour to complete. They are a slow motion sneeze.
Because they don't breathe.
Right.
They don't have the big baffles to expel a large quantity, right?
So they're kind of just twitching to move, consolidate, and push away yuck. This is essentially what's going on. But both sponges and humans sneeze essentially to expel waste as a mechanism. We might be able to walk away from a place filled with dust or pollen. They cannot if the water around them gets too dirty. They need to find a way to clear out that water so they can continue to filter feed. And so organic matter exists in the water around a reef where these sponges live, but most of it isn't concentrated enough to kind of be in places where other animals can eat it. So it also turns out that by sponges doing this slow motion sneeze, they are concentrating and expelling this edible mucus in small, convenient packages, like little snacks for animals to eat.
Sneeze packets.
Yeah. And so they think that most, if not all, sponges sneeze based on this research. And there are potential future opportunities to understand the material cycling, exactly the mechanism, how it's moved, how they know when to do it, kind of like what the impetus for it is. And so it also actually looks in these videos like the mucus moves along predefined paths on the surface of the sponge before they accumulate. So they would love to go through, take more videos, try out different waste distributions in the water, check different species, do all this stuff to try to figure out what is happening with sponge sneezes. But for now, we know for sure they sneeze, and their sneezes provide delicious mucus to other fish on the reef for food. So they don't eat their own boogers, but fish do. So there you go. Sharing is caring.
Fada in the chat is asking you, are we sure this is a sneeze? Why isn't it defined as a fart? I guess it's because you can't smell the difference underwater. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
And
Yeah, I
Grouchy
mean, it's
Gamer,
just
Grouchy Gamer asks, why don't we sneeze while sleeping? Oh, we do.
if you have
We do all the time.
yes,
You
and
just
it
you're
usually
asleep,
will
so
wake
you
you
don't
up.
notice.
So my understanding is that the sponges have one opening. So they water comes in through the pores and out through the top. So this stuff is coming from the surface of the sponge. So I'm actually going to answer this question. If it were a
You found a
fart,
reasonable answer.
it would come from the top of the sponge
The
where water
tube.
comes out. Yes.
Right.
But
Okay.
because it's coming from where water comes in, it is more akin to a nose and therefore is a sneeze, let's say.
Because it's releasing mucus, and that's one of
Okay.
the big hallmarks is the fact that
Yes.
mucus is involved.
Yes, farts are not well known for mucus as part of the transaction. So this is definitely
You hope.
You
I
hope.
should have-
not ideally.
Not ideally. Blair, thank you for this fantastic information.
You're so
now we can
welcome.
answer the question.
So next time you're washing your dishes with a sponge, just think about it. Think about it sneezing or other things we've talked about. You're welcome.
Or other things, yeah. Now I will be contemplating sponge sneezes and sponge farts for the rest of the evening. But we have more science. How about plant roots? Plants like to put down roots, but maybe they don't put them down exactly the way that we want them to, or the way that is the most ideal, or maybe learning about the genetics behind the way that plant genetic circuits, proteins that work together to define the paths that plant roots take. Maybe understanding those circuits can lead us to being able to implement genetic control over not just plants, but other complex biological systems. Yes. So a paper out in Science this week out of Stanford University and some other collaborators, researchers have taken a look at plant genetic parts. These are plant synthetic biologists who are interested in spatial patterns of gene expression and have been able to engineer them in plants to actually modulate root morphology. They've changed the way that the roots look. So historically, yes, genetic control, we've been able to control all sorts of things, and we've learned about various circuits that work in a sense as logic gates. And specifically in this study, they focus on initially a species of plant that it's kind of like tobacco related plant, Nicotiana benthamiana, and they were able to develop and measure circuit performance using green fluorescent protein to be able to see where their circuits were ending up. And this circuit that they were focusing on, it's a logic operation known as a Nimpley gate. And they were able to control this Nimpley, spelled Nimply, this Nimpley gate. They discovered that there are certain transcription factor proteins that are modular. So there are binding and regulatory parts that are physically and functionally separate. And what this led them to be able to do was determine a bunch of or Nimpley gate functions in this tobacco relative. And then they took what they learned in the tobacco relative and they put it on a model species. You're talking about model species earlier. In the plant world, Arabidopsis thaliana is the big model species, and
tiny model species.
Big
model, tiny plant.
Yeah, but they were able to alter its root morphology. Initially, though, one of the interesting aspects of the study is that they discovered that it wasn't a direct correlation. And so half of the circuits that worked in the tobacco relative did not work in the Arabidopsis. And what that indicated to them is that there's a lot more complexity. And so Arabidopsis is a slightly more complex plant organism than the original that they were studying. And so this increased complexity changed the outcome of these logic operations. There were other things in the black box doing work. Eventually, they were able to determine what those factors were and get all of their logic gates working. But the whole idea is, with this synthetic, the synthetic gene circuits, is being able to put stuff in place to, hopefully, eventually, deal with needs for increased nutrition in plants, because maybe we'll be growing more plants on less ground. How are we going to deal with the nutritional needs of people? Maybe we need to get more plant matter out of plants for the populations that we have. How are we going to get these plants that we use to deal with climate change? Can we get plants to actually help us fight climate change? So on the plant side, synthetic biology and control over organisms could be really useful. But then the fact that they're doing this kind of stuff and learning about these logic gates in plants suggests that it could then be applied to other organisms with greater complexity.
Mhm.
I'll just leave it to you to imagine where it could go. I don't know, Blair, maybe this is the kind of research that we're going to need to bring back things like the thylacine or the mammoth. Maybe these are the kinds of genetic controls that we're going to need for the rhinos, for the hybrid organisms that we're going to be potentially trying to save. Or, maybe this is the kind of stuff that's going to be necessary.
Wow. I love that idea. I'm sure everyone saw that somebody put out a press release this week that they're gonna bring the thylacine back.
Yeah.
Great. We'll see.
Well, great. Great.
No, I love this. This is really smart. Taking some of the limitations and just ditching them completely.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's interesting also when geneticists and biologists start looking from a computational perspective at biological functions. So this combines with this. How does it work? We're going to have an IFTT if that, this, then that. That's what IFTTT. If this, then that kind of situation in biology, right? With genes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Man, this is like just the beginning. I feel like we're on the precipice of such a cool field of innovation with genetics that I cannot even imagine what we're going to see in the next 20 years. I'm so excited. We'll be here to talk about it.
Maybe we'll be talking about the return of the thylacine.
Oh man, that'd be so cool.
Dang, things are everywhere. How do we get rid of all these thylacines? What is it there? I don't even know what we're talking
Tasmanian
about.
tiger.
Oh, it's the Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's the devil, the Tasmanian devil. Exhibit that's good. There's they're opening a Tasmanian devil exhibit at the Copenhagen Zoo.
Very nice. Yes, if they opened a Tasmanian tiger exhibit, that would be very impressive because they are completely extinct.
Completely extinct. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Except for the hopes and
There's
dreams of a few people with money and science.
So much money.
So much money. Let's talk about old things. Justin, you have some ancient genes from South America?
Well, actually, it's a combination of current genes. And backtracking. So this is unable to load file. Why? Okay, here it's back. By looking, so what they did is now it's gone again. Where'd it go? It just says I should wait. Oh, there we go.
That was a roller coaster.
Here we're back, ladies and gentlemen.
What's going to happen now? I have no idea.
This is where we cut. 3, 2, 1. Oh, good question, Kiki. By looking at people today with the rare Q haplogroup, researchers have traced the roots of South American ancestry back over 19,000 years to South America.
Huh.
The study based on an archaeological study that compiled a data set of 1,661 radiocarbon dates, like over 1,500 of them made on culture materials and from some 118 human teeth, bones, from 454 different archaeological sites in South America. What they found is that based on the diversity of Q haplotypes spread across South and Central America today, they must have evolved there over the past 19,300-ish years. So, and it could be much older than that, since we know there's a genetic bottleneck that occurs around 12,500 years ago, coinciding with the Younger Dryas extinction event, which places a barrier on which samples are even in existence today. So we're looking at post-bottleneck with the current modern human samples that we have with this Q. But because, so when you have a haplogroup or one of these things, it's a big umbrella that broke off from a bigger umbrella at some point. And they have all these subcategories too. So from several different subcategories that broke off from this Q, they can backtrack how long it would have taken for them to evolve. And it also gives them, with the distribution between Argentina and Mexico, great confidence that all of this divergence going back 19,300-ish years would have taken place in South America, somewhere in that vicinity. So I did a little bit of further looking into it and found previous research that said the haplogroup Q originated in Asia around 20,000 years ago, only crossing the Bering Strait into the American continent sometime between 16,500 and 13,000 years ago. So now we know that is not correct. So again, the previous conclusion was based on assumptions about when the Americas were populated, and it almost seems like it just stated that, and must not have had any evidence, must not have actually done the same sort of research or had this. Well, I don't know if those were based on backtracking or if that was from the Siberian sample, which was about 20,000 years ago. But anyways, it says, as we now have evidence of populations in the Americas much older than even the emergence of these genes in Asia, which is also not completely true, but the arrow seems to point in the other direction in terms of genetic flow. Not that anyone other than me, Justin Jackson, is saying this, but if they previously concluded gene flow based on data for time present in a region, and those data points flip in terms of which one's the old and which one's the newer one, perhaps also the conclusions they made based on that data should also flip.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps. So there is, the overall estimation of the entire Q family is estimated currently to be about 30-something thousand years back. They, I guess, had the first evidence of it in Asia around 20,000 years ago. We now have pretty convincing evidence that it was in the Americas about 20,000 years ago. So where does it go back further than that? Well, in the Americas, we know people go back much further.
Well, we know now. We didn't always know.
For this gene, for this specific gene. But we also know now that we have the Americas were populated with evidence 30,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And so as that's starting to be the time frame of the Q emergence. And interesting fact, the pre-Columbian haplogroup for native peoples in the Americas, 90% Q. or at least in South and Central America, with certainty. But there was that North American one, the 12,500-year-old child. That there was this big controversy, should they test it? Shouldn't they test it? And the Native American community allowed a Danish geneticist to go and do the testing, and I think they were Danish anyway. But they determined that kid was Q, and that's I think it's somewhere far up in North America. So pretty much that's kind of starting to look like the arrow pointing the other way. Hang on, I got a little bit more here to go. It is extremely widespread, Q, though. It's a rare haplogroup everywhere else in the world. Larry David has the Q haplogroup, as do about 5% of Ashkenazi Jews. Sweden and Denmark have a similar 5%, making Scandinavia the highest Q haplogroup in Europe. And it's
then I have Q. I'm sure I probably have Q.
It's very rare. It's 5% of Scandinavia.
Oh, but it's in a lot. They've got lots of Scandinavia.
But that's the high. It's the highest. It's the highest of Q in Europe is in Scandinavia, and it's thought to have arrived there really early on, after Bronze Age times, 3,000-4,000-ish years ago or more. It was also believed to have spread to Eastern Europe, the Middle East. Largely with the help of Mongolian hordes half a century ago. But it's really interesting in all these places it sort of pops up around the world. But in dominant pre-Columbian haplogroup of Native Americans, maybe north, but definitely south, it was approximately 90%. So a very, very strong signal of this haplogroup in the Americas, and the Americas population is coinciding with how old they think that haplogroup is. So there's some figuring they need to do, but they probably won't come to. Yeah, go ahead.
Which if you think about the timing and all these things, this probably suggests a raft across the ocean from Asia to South America at some point.
No, with this, I mean, the thing that I'm starting.
What is it supporting?
Right. The thing that I think it's starting to support is not the Bering. Well, it's probably likely to be the Bering crossing area.
Okay.
Right.
Because of all the northern.
But this is an area that horses went back and forth many times throughout the eons. Right. It would at some points be an open valley you could walk across with grasslands. Even if you go back far enough, earlier than that ice age, that that they thought that there were islands there, but still, there's times where that's a very traversable area. And the next place we see this Q and Native American ancestry down even into Mongolia and the Altai is in Siberia down into Mongolian and Western China. So what it tells me, though, what the story seems to paint the picture of, is a much earlier group. And I would say probably over 50,000 years.
That's old.
Coming to the Americas. As people are populating Australia. Yeah, I would say maybe even older.
Yeah. We don't have that evidence, though, right? Physical evidence.
Yeah,
we don't have physical. This potentially points that. Yeah.
But this is and then people coming back and populating Siberia after having populated the Americas. So that, you go the other direction, that ocean you can't cross. So we got to turn around and go all the way back. And go all the way back over. And then that is reintroduced, because there's a couple of bottlenecks in Asia where populations disappear, where there were cultures that we don't have explanations for because we have no human remains for, but we know we're not related culturally to any of the populations that came in after. All of it starts to add up to paint these really strange pictures of a potential peopling of the Americas, much more ancient than we thought, and then a return to Asia to add that back to that gene pool, which is why the signal is strongest in the Americas and gets less and less strong as you get further away from it. It's why the timelines are older in the Americas than they are when you get further and further away from them. Like, all of that does paint the picture that if it was flipped the other way, people would say, aha, here's proof and evidence of. But then you flip the data and people are like, well, we don't have any evidence that conclusively can tell us one way or another way.
We don't have it.
Yeah.
It seems like we're constantly faced with this conversation of like, but how much gene flow is happening? How much are humans moving? How much? And it's like, I hear conversations about this stuff, and it sounds like when you talk about something like a tiger salamander that's a ring species, where like you have very distinct genetic populations in very distinct areas, and they really don't leave those areas. But really, it's sounding more and more like we were migratory birds. Like we were just all over the map, right?
So
like
yes
we're
or
little
no.
sandpipers, just
let's
like
go other places.
no, I'm gonna cross a continent.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cross an ocean. I'm gonna see what's over there. Like I am not constrained.
But
Looking
keep
for
in mind,
Misty
these are over thousands of years. So these populations themselves, even ones that are living 100 miles from each other, may not meet. They can remain very isolated, forming specific languages, specific genotypes that don't mix for a very long time, which is partly how we are able to also tell that these disparate, isolated groups had to have gone back over a specific, 20,000 years to have been from a single source, because the lack of interaction for so long.
I don't know. I'm not convinced that they never that things were as walled off as you say, because also when you study animals, you always think like, okay, this is where this animal hangs out, and then you put telemetry on them, and it turns out no, you were wrong. They were all over the place. Like it's hard for me to believe that in the Americas, for example, that over the course of a few weeks, somebody wouldn't just go on an exploration and go hundreds of miles and run into other humans and then just be like, all right, I'm going to go back or whatever. But, it just, yes, I don't like the idea of these like very strict walls and divisions of.
Nobody likes that. But Blair, go somewhere that's 100 miles from San Francisco without a car and don't buy anything.
Carry everything you need with you. You have to forage for your food. Yeah,
you do.
Sure, I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm also saying there was no TV. So,
but if like Justin's saying, horses were going back and forth, other animals are traveling back and forth. The idea of nomadic human populations that followed animals as they were hunting them, as they were following. Oh, the rains are coming, the snows are coming. We're going to move from the mountains down into the lowlands, and we'll go from the lowlands and we'll go to this other area. Oh, look, somebody found this river. Let's go there and have fish. You could see how it could move over time, but yeah, the idea of a single person just like going on a walk. It happens, but it's not as successful.
But I'm sure somebody did it. Yeah, of course.
Sure. That's why we have the National Geographic Society right now. And
Greenland is that story. No, Greenland. The current native population of Greenland was from a Canadian native population, a Canadian or far north United States, whatever, somewhere in that area, who apparently committed a murder. And was like, totally convinced someone.
I'm gonna scoot.
Oh, I have a vision. There's this place way over here. We need to go there. I had a vision that says we're gonna go. So they all followed this guy, sledging, crossing water, makes it to Greenland, and the Inuits who are in Greenland are on the brink of starvation because they've been in isolation, lacking technology for a long time. They don't. They're like wearing muskox, and no, they're not wearing. They're wearing seal skins because they think muskox are dirty animals, so they don't hunt them or eat them because they've got some rumor that you don't want to be a muskox. So they're not wearing fur. Or anyway, they came and basically saved the population, this murderer on the run, by just going on a long walk, hundreds of miles and crossing waters. It exactly happened. Yeah.
Time to make a move.
Good old Kana. Good old Kana.
Oh, spiritual leaders. They get away.
The eagle told me we need to leave town. Snap, everybody. He said, quick. That eagle said, we got to go now. Take what you got on you. Just fly like an eagle. Let's go. Come on. Shh, keep your head down.
Fly like an eagle or like a styrofoam cup to the recycling plant. I'm going to switch topics.
Is styrofoam, has that been recyclable all this time and I've just been neglectful?
It's very expensive to recycle. It's not easy to recycle. I mean, really, for the large majority of what you're going to do with your styrofoam is it's going to end up in the landfill. But researchers at Virginia Tech University, also working with a colleague at Santa Clara University and Dongbei University of Finance and Economics, have published their paper in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, a new process that they say is relatively affordable and scalable to large situations. And the key here is it's not really recycling of polystyrene or what we officially know as styrofoam. Polystyrene, it's hard to kind of melt it and turn it into other polystyrene. It's like once it's in its shape, that's kind of where it's going to be and how it's going to be used. So turning it from one use of polystyrene into another use of polystyrene is expensive and difficult. However, these researchers have published a paper that in which they've taken chemical reactions where they have also involved ultraviolet light irradiation and been able to break polystyrene down to its aromatic compounds. And then by adding certain solvents, they could extract different materials. So they get diphenylmethane. They've also got raw products that can be raw gasoline, asphalt. They've also got 4-oxo-4-phenylbutyric acid, a whole bunch of other things that are useful in chemical operations that could then also be sold for a profit.
You say they did all of this in an RV on the outskirts of Albuquerque?
Sorry, I had a cat scratching at the door. Yes, no, not that. And we're not talking about Breaking Bad. This is Breaking Good. This is chemistry for good. They suggest in their paper that this process is scalable and that the estimated cost of building a plant capable of producing these products is a mere $1.28 million. Mere. They conclude that this strategy of upcycling is viable. It could get rid of plastic that piles up, the polystyrene, styrofoam stuff that we use for takeout containers and plates and stuff, and also give a financial incentive to take care of it because the products could be sold. Yeah. So fingers crossed that they, with this paper, are selling their idea of.
I still want to see them add into their equation before this is a thing. The cost of my time of sorting another thing and the energy that takes and the fuel it takes to have a truck that's because it's like you can fill up the truck with, several blocks full of aluminum cans. You get the cardboard truck, comes up several blocks and goes through a whole neighborhood collecting the cardboard. And the styrofoam truck comes by and it's like one piece of styrofoam. It's got to go back to the factory.
So, think about like packaging in factories. There's mass styrofoam being produced for sure.
Yeah,
that could go to this besides your cup. However, what I was gonna say was, I understand the effort here, and I applaud the effort. However, why don't we just stop using styrofoam? There are places where it has been completely illegalized. Like in San Francisco, you can't use styrofoam anymore. In most of California, I think styrofoam is illegal. There's different packaging you can use. There's different takeout containers you can use. It's pretty much gone in my life, and I do not miss it. So I don't understand why we can't just cut it out, why we have to be doing this.
I agree with you for the personal products. I don't see why
Oh.
polystyrene is used in a lot of cases. We could just do away with it as a, yeah. But there's a lot of it out there in the
Yeah.
world
Certainly
that
there is.
could
Well,
be
it's the-
remediated. And
I would just say, let's not make any more.
I don't
It's
know.
the
What are they going to
first-
pack your $1,500 62-inch thin flat screen quantum
The
8K television?
that like
in-
papery,
Sponges.
cardboardy forms.
And
Or
sponges.
how about the styrofoam made out of mushrooms that are biodegradable? How about that?
That sounds like a. What Kiki?
and
I
then you
think
can
what
take
Blair
it and put it
is
in the closet, and then you can grow the mushrooms in your closet. No.
Blair is pointing out is the first of the 3 R's, because you got
Reduce.
yeah, you got the reuse and recycle. That comes later. The first thing that just eliminates the problem altogether. Just reduce the amount that you're using. You don't even have to reuse or recycle anything.
Amen.
Yes.
This is This Week in Science. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Science News Discussion. We are so glad to be here with you once again. Thank you. If you are enjoying the show, please share it with a friend today so you can share that discussion with someone else. All right, some quick COVID news as we come back from that little break. What's up with COVID? Well, a new study has been published. It's a preprint, not actually published in a peer-reviewed journal yet, but researchers working together looking at 99 people with long COVID for the last couple of years. They've been following them for over a year and doing deep dives into their blood, their T cells, and their immune signals. So basically looking for signals within the blood to see what's different in the blood of people with long COVID. Most of these people were struggling with intense fatigue, brain fog, and other symptoms. They seem to have a common factor, which is low levels of cortisol, which is a hormone that helps in controlling inflammation. They had glucose differences, and this is also involved in their sleep cycles as well. And features of their T cells suggested that the T cells were struggling, that they had been working very hard, and they were still working very hard, but they were tired. So there are particular signals that T cells give off that they are working, that they are overworked. And this study falls right in line with another paper that was peer-reviewed back in January that did document also low cortisol in people with these long respiratory symptoms. The big difference being number of subjects in the two studies, and the initial study only followed long COVID patients who were about 3 months after infection, where these were looking at people who had been recovered for many, many, many more months. They actually found it challenging, the researchers say, to find people who were fully recovered from COVID. Many post-COVID volunteers said they were healthy, but then when it came down to it, they were exhausted during their gym workouts. So the numbers of people they actually ended up recruiting were less than they were hoping to get. Anyway, long COVID probably has to do with chronic inflammation, probably has to do with these exhausted T cells, the virus kind of sticking around, similar to stuff like Epstein-Barr and chronic fatigue syndrome, and herpes virus, where they can sit and be dormant inside cells for extended periods and then kind of resurge. And so SARS-CoV-2 may also be something that lingers in some patients as well. The highlight of this, good news though, is that it could be possible to use this information to start targeting therapies that address the decrease in cortisol that address the depleted T cells and start treating it kind of as an autoimmune disease to calm the immune system down. So potential benefits.
This is like the withstanding mystery about COVID, right? Is the long COVID situation, and it just does not want to go away in some people, not everyone.
Yeah, small 20 to 30% of patients.
That sounds like a big percentage to me.
I'm wondering how.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering how many other ailments are long haul ailments, and we
that's
don't
interesting.
know because this is one of the few times in all of our human history where we all got the same thing at once. Well, I didn't get it,
and we started having the science, the technology to be able to track stuff,
and the technology to track it. But it was sort of like the anecdotal women were talking about, after the vaccine, like their menstruation cycles were a little bit different than they were used to. And then they did a study and they found out, hey, that's not just an anecdote. That's not just a one or two off. That's a thing. That's a trend that we connect with the vaccine.
And that's the same thing that was long COVID as well, because people started using social media to connect with each other, saying, hey, my symptoms aren't going away and my doctor isn't believing me, and and they say it can't still be COVID. And so there was a real surge of people finding community online as well, and that enabling I guess a groundswell of enough people, enough voices to actually make researchers really take note.
Yeah, and I think to Justin's point about how 20% actually feels like a lot, I think that's an important piece of the conversation that again and again is not being talked about when we talk about, like, oh, well, you're vaccinated, you'll probably get COVID now, but you'll just get it for a little bit and then you'll be fine. You'll just miss some work. It's not a big deal. Like, open everything up. This is the piece that I feel like keeps getting ignored, is if you have a 1 in 5 chance when you get infected of having this for months, that is a different risk than just being sick for 5 days.
Yep. Mm-hmm. But if we don't talk about it, nobody thinks about it. It's okay. Yeah, and and these numbers may also be. I was going to say these numbers may also be. There is conversation about these numbers because different numbers have showed up. It's been as low as 8%, 5 to 8%, as high as 20 to 30%, depending on the study and depending on the sample of individuals that have been looked at. So
depending on whether or not their doctors believed them.
I mean, that's part of it, the data collection, right?
It's just funny that people think that they can win the lottery, which is a 1 in several million, but they don't think that they're going to get a disease or the effects of a disease that, even being optimistic, are around 1 in 10.
Yep. Well, speaking of data collection and communication and who we trust around things like COVID, the news this week is that Rochelle Walensky, the director of the CDC, has ordered a lot of reorganization.
Shaking things up.
Shaking it up at the CDC, restructuring things, really taking to heart the fact that the CDC failed when it came to giving guidance to the United States population, that COVID itself was, and the guidance they gave was confusing and overwhelming. She has brought in people from outside the agency and also is doing agency conversations, talking to people working in the agency. They're basically doing a big review to see how the systems in the CDC work, what's working, what's not working. They're going to be restructuring where scientific agencies report. The scientific divisions in the agency are now going to report directly to Walensky's office. There's going to be a new executive council reporting to her as well, setting the priorities for the agency and directing spending. And then as well, when it comes to spending, there has been an issue for a long time regarding something like a pandemic for a one-time big push that involves the entire United States and coordination across many states, the funding the CDC has really isn't there, and they have to go to Congress for special funding to be able to fund the work that they do. And previous CDC directors have actually said that, they didn't have enough money to send people on flights to go to places where outbreaks were happening, to be on the ground. So there are issues related to where the money is, how much money they have, how that money is being spent. Additionally, the CDC has to come back from a lot of the changes that occurred during the Trump administration. One of those being a complete
Pandemic
shift.
response team.
The pandemic response team.
Right.
Yeah. And additionally, during, it was in June of 2020, it was it was announced that a Trump-related data collections company called not telehealth, I will open up
Tell
my
you
thing.
what.
I'm going to tell you something. Yes. There was a company that Trump, the administration, directed hospitals to stop reporting all their data to the CDC directly and give the data to a Pittsburgh-based software company called Teletracking Technologies. The company had really never worked on anything this big before. A lot of people were like, "What are you doing?" But it came out that this company was very closely related to big funders, owned by funders of the Trump administration.
You don't say.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of trouble getting the data from the hospitals, then to the teletracker, then to the CDC. The data was getting sifted and edited, and there were pieces in the puzzle that did not quite fit anymore. And so, yeah, the CDC couldn't give good guidance because they weren't necessarily getting the data that they needed. So as of December this year, that contract is ending, and all data reporting is going to go back to the CDC. And so they're going to be really looking at how the data is being put. Yes.
Grift, the gift that keeps on giving. Well,
the grifting.
Yeah, and the other thing too, in all of this shakeup and doing things better too, like there's a point when it's just not your fault. When you are telling people point blank that we need to take XYZ actions, and a big part of our population says no. You've done what you can. If the lemurs are still going off the cliff,
lemmings. You're thinking of lemmings.
Lemurs. I'm sorry, the lemmings. Lemurs,
and the lemurs too.
You would think they would know better. You would think they would know better, but they get caught up in all the excitement of the lemur. Oh gosh.
The lemmings.
What's the thing? Lemming.
They don't even live in the same place.
When you're throwing lemons off a cliff.
Thank you.
Llamas.
Thank you. This is how Blair got the job. She could real time correct me. But they were giving at some point got to good advice that needed to be followed. Previous to that, I think we would agree. We were seeing scientific publications we were talking about on the show that made it sound scarier than the CDC thought it seemed to stance was anyway, or even the World Health Organization's stance at that time was. But we were seeing studies coming out saying, "Oh nope, this aerolizes. It stays in the air. This is respiratory. It's not about touch." And it took a long time for them to adopt the findings that science was making. No, I noticed that in real time as we were doing the show, but there was the point when they're up to speed and they're giving the good advice, and that's the majority of the takeoff of the virus spread is when people were getting the right advice. There wasn't a messaging problem from the CDC. There was a dissemination problem through media. That's a whole other issue that's out of their control. So
Agreed. A dissemination problem. And then also, communications really comes down to the understanding when you have a message at hand and how people are taking that. And so there were big gaps in making
Yes.
sure that real understanding was happening as opposed to just, this is our message. Yeah.
And
but
most importantly,
I was just gonna say, props to Rochelle Walensky. I mean, she is accepting they did a really bad job. They've dropped the ball on monkeypox as well. We are not in a good position, and she's taken that and she's saying this needs to change. It's not reflecting well on anyone. Who knows if trust can be redeemed, but they're gonna try.
Yeah, and we've bought like 60,000 doses of monkeypox vaccine that are still sitting in Denmark because nobody's come to pick them up.
What?
Good.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be fine.
We paid for it. Apparently they ship fine. They don't need to be cold temperature stored, I don't believe. But yeah, they're sitting here in Denmark still. The company's making them, just filling up a warehouse. America's paying for it. And still haven't come to pick it up. But I did want to get to one important thing before we go, because I just heard this.
United States federal government, you have a shipment to pick up. Is anyone going to come by here? I mean, I know it's like a weekend, but do you want to come pick up these monkeypox doses?
It is confusing to pick up a package in Denmark because it could be it could be anywhere. You could go to a 7-Eleven and pick up your packages. Like, they ship it to all these weird mom and pop liquor stores. No, it's like really weird. Or you have a code on your phone and go to a drop box and a grocery, like in a parking lot down a dark alley. Like, it makes no sense. Sometimes you have to go across town, pick up packages at different places. It's ridiculous. But I did want to point out, because this is very important to finish this. According to something I just heard from Beast Price in our chat room, lemmings don't go off cliffs either. So we all stand corrected.
So much. I just want to all the things that start with L.
Yes, JG, when life gives you lemurs, make lemerade.
When life gives you lemurs, trade them in for a llama. This is TWIS. We hope you are enjoying our show so far this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are looking at this show or listening to this show and thinking to yourself, I wish I could help this show out. How can I help this show out? Well, first, make sure you click a little heart, a like. Give us a little like somewhere in there so that other people know that you like it. Subscribe and tell your friends. But the big thing is that you can go to TWIS.org and click on the Patreon link. Patreon is our listener support community, and anyone who chooses to support us at $10 or more per month will be thanked by name at the end of the show. I'd love to read your name. So head over to TWIS.org, click on that Patreon link to help support TWIS now. We can't do this without you. Thank you so much for your support. All right, let's come back right now to the part of the show that's going to be full of French brains. Meep tonight. It's Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels, there's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Well, at Kiki's behest, I suppose I should start with some finch brains. This is a study from Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. Had a lot of studies from them lately. They are on fire with their animal science. They wanted to look at how juvenile zebra finches learn songs directly from another finch. For the purpose of this, what we call a tutor. This is usually their father, but it can be other older birds. And that social interaction keeps them motivated and on task to learn songs. This study wanted to know how those things are related, whether they can learn songs from a speaker, if they can learn songs from a recording of a tutor, or if it has to be a live present tutor, and what is going on in the brain if it's dependent upon a live teacher. So you guessed it. If they are only hearing from the speaker, it doesn't really help. They do a pretty poor job learning. It has to involve a live tutor in some way. So in the study where they wanted to look at kind of first of all what it required for finches to learn quickly, over a few days they recorded brain activity and under the following situations. The first was with a juvenile who had never heard a tutor song before, listened to it through a speaker. So that's like the least connected. Then we have a juvenile directly interacting with the tutor as he sang. And then finally, they went kind of in the middle. They listened to the tutor's song through the speaker, a tutor they had already met. So they found that generally speaking, they needed some sort of social context. They needed to have a tutor involved in some way to be able to learn the songs. It seems like they did best with the live tutor, but they also did very well if they had already met the live tutor and they were listening to that individual through a speaker. If they were listening just to an unknown bird through a speaker, they didn't do a very good job learning. So they wanted to know what was going on in the brain. And this is where I'm going to do my very best, and Kiki can chime in and help. So this all started with about 20 years ago. Scientists studied human babies and found that they needed a personal guide to recognize pieces of language. And so their idea was that there was something going on in the brain that cued them in to pay attention. It's all a question of attention. Store this data. Pay attention. Don't look elsewhere. Listen to your tutor. So they focused on a brain area called the locus coeruleus, LC. Which, did I say it wrong? Say it. Okay. All right. Which is known to be involved in attention and arousal. And so neurons from this brain area, they helped them to kind of order their auditory functions. And then they also wanted to look at the caudomedial nidopallium, NCM. And so they, from previous work, have decided that this is where juveniles' memories of these tutor songs are formed and stored. So they wanted to look at these two areas. Their hypothesis was that these two circuits working together might be important, but they hadn't looked at juveniles in particular and didn't know how having a live tutor there related to that. So both brain regions responded more strongly when the tutor sang. And they heard the tutor singing through the speaker. That also lit up these areas of the brain. They responded well. The LC neurons were active constantly while the tutor sang. So they were responding to the vocal communication itself more than specific notes. It wasn't like peaking at certain moments in the song. And if the researchers inactivated the neurons from the LC to the NCM, so this circuit between these two areas, when the tutor sang with social interaction, they were unable to accurately copy their song. So they think it's this area of the brain for sure that is kind of turning on and lighting up and kind of logging the information. So the LC, they think, is conveying a secondary type of information. They're not just saying, hey, listen to this music. They think that the LC is focusing attention. Mm-hmm. So the NCM neurons are actually cueing into a bunch of inputs from different regions in the brain. And the LC, in connection with that other area of the brain, is actually what's telling them, hey, this is important. Learn your songs. Right. Does that all make sense to you, Kiki?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah. The bird brain, we've known about this this circuit for song learning and song production for a very long time, and it's been this kind of analog to human vocal learning for, like you gave the history, but understanding exactly how that tutoring aspect works and why a baby bird doesn't necessarily learn from just anybody. How does it learn from its parent tutor as opposed to the male that is, the closest other male in the colony? These birds are very social in nature, so a specificity would be very important. And so having that kind of attentional focus on the most important caregiver or picking, a particular individual to be the tutor would make a big difference.
Yeah, and so you're actually cueing into exactly what the next step of this research probably is going to be, which is the cues that juveniles are using to capture social context and identify the importance of this one individual. It's exactly what you're talking about. What cues are telling their brain, these are the songs you got to pay attention to, listen to them, copy them, store this away for later. This is so important to the development of these little finchies and when they're forming their memories of songs. So they want to continue to investigate how social learning circuits function, which is what are the cues of this individual? Like I said, is it like a chemical? Is it other information that is lighting up these particular neurons to gauge the importance of which zebra finch is important and what they're doing is important? And so they also want to see this. I didn't even think about this, but they also want to look forward into the future to see what cues the juveniles give the tutors to encourage the tutor to teach them. Because
that's a good one.
Yeah, it also appears to be more than, it's not passive. It's like they're saying, like, repeat after me, and they're singing, and so there appears to be
no toodle doot
exactly
closer.
read to me, sing to me, right? So how are they telling their tutor, like, I'm ready to learn, sing for me so I can learn? So there's a lot of dynamics here we're not totally understanding, but I think the thing that I really liked about this is that there's something going on in their brain specifically telling them, hey, listen up, this individual is important and this information is important.
Yeah. One interesting thing about the whole song system there as a sideline is that these birds are kind of born with a little bit of an idea of what a song should sound like, and then they listen to their tutor, and then they do a little compare and contrast, and they have this like plastic period after they leave their tutor behind to figure it all out before they head out on their own to become
get some
an adult.
individuality, perhaps.
Yeah, and they have little slight variations of their own, but it's the tutor helps mold and shape the song, which is very stereotyped within a bird like the zebra finch.
I love it. I think
so cool.
In that tiny little bird brain, there's just so much going on.
So much, yeah. And then you go from there, and it's like, okay, in the bird brain, you've got this attention. Pay attention. This is the thing that you have to listen to compare against to make sure that you're getting the right song. But then in other birds that are social in a way where their vocal system is more plastic, do they have that same kind of attentional aspect? Like, so that's that's a question. If the song isn't so stereotyped, if they learn multiple songs, if there are, like in parrot species, the brain is a different beast in parrot species, but
totally
they have a very different social structure as well, with something like you might compare to a chimp social structure with multiple adults that kind of teach you with multiple tutors. So very interesting questions that can be delved into from there.
Yeah, and then you have bird species that have really basic, boring songs. Like, how many times do you have to hear a peacock before you know how to be a peacock, right? Do you? Yeah, really. Anyway, moving from tiny bird brains, let's talk about tiny spider pedipalps, huh?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
So this is a study from the National University of Singapore, and they wanted to look at a specific kind of theory about how males can combat female cannibalization. So if you
Oh, do tell.
yes.
How does one avoid being devoured by the female of this species?
Running away. I mean,
Yes.
maybe other than.
First instinct.
So there's evolutionary arms races that happen between species like predator and prey, but there are also evolutionary arms races that happen between male and female when there is an intense size difference, and or the female often tries to eat the male during or immediately after copulation.
Oh gosh.
So there is a evolutionary advantage to a male who can either escape being eaten, because then maybe he can live longer and father more offspring, or if he can just find a way to father more offspring despite being eaten. Similarly, if the female gets a benefit from cannibalizing that male, like for example, nutrients, sweet nutrients, that allows her to grow more eggs and have better quality offspring, then there is an evolutionary advantage for her, right? So there is this push-pull that's happening. So there are different theories that kind of feed into this, and how specifically the males can kind of counteract the negatives of being cannibalized in a mating situation.
Stop tasting good.
I mean, they can't help it. So there's a theory of male mating syndrome, which posits that male spiders are under sexual conflict pressure in sexually cannibalistic situations. Yes, sounds correct. As they may only have a single chance to mate. So how can they optimize that single opportunity to mate? And in this study, they explored whether male spiders use additional cannibalism countering strategies by focusing on two mating tactics. One, the better charged palp hypothesis, which predicts that male spiders will selectively make use of one of their sexual organs, yes, they have two, known as pedipalps, that contain more sperm. So that if this is going to be their only opportunity to impregnate a female, pick the one with more sperm. So it's the better charged palp hypothesis. The other hypothesis they wanted to test was the fast sperm transfer hypothesis, which is exactly what it sounds like: accelerated insemination so that they can get more sperm out of their body before they're eaten.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
So, yeah. Question about the charged pedipalp
Yes.
hypothesis. If they're choosing the one that has more sperm in it already, that means that they are increasing the competition that their sperm are under when it comes to inseminating any spider eggs in the future.
Yes, although she has a lot. So I think the expectation is that more sperm, more fertilized eggs.
It's all good.
Okay. We have a picture up on the screen being shared there.
Yeah.
Is this the same species,
Yes.
male and female of a spider?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
The male is very tiny.
So tiny.
The male looks like
Food.
looks like a little cranberry, and
Yeah.
the spider there looks like
Looks
a
like a
giant
Yeah.
death spider, almost like a wasp.
Yeah,
with
so this
discoloration
is
on
an
that
orb
one.
weaver. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with that size differential and looking like a snack, I mean, good luck.
Yes. So it's interesting you bring up the size differential. They performed comparative tests on 5 species of orb weaver spiders from Singapore. They had varying levels of female sexual cannibalism and sexual size dimorphism. They wanted to look at both. The proclivity to eat the male And also just if they're just so much bigger. So they found essentially both of their hypotheses were true. Male spiders choose one of a paired sexual organ with more sperm for the first copulation with a cannibalistic female, and male transfers more sperm if a female is cannibalistic or when the female is of a much larger physical size. So they really saw that both of these are true. So this provides credibility for the male mating syndrome. Why do we care? This opens new research questions on the ability of male spiders to differentiate sperm quantities between his palps. How does he know which one? It's such a teeny tiny volume difference. It's not like, oh, one's heavier. I'm dragging on one side of my butt. No, it's very, very small, the difference. So how do they know? So this is really the question now, is if they are really making that decision, they have to have some sort of signal, chemical, hormonal, I don't know what. Is it always the same one in a particular species? We don't know. So that's a new interesting avenue of research to look at. And then they also want to look at the mechanism by which they can just somehow transfer sperm faster. What is happening in their body that allows that to happen? So there's lots of future research that can come with this. But they also think that it's worth looking at just other types of spiders. They were only looking at orb weaver spiders, and there are lots of cannibalistic spider species. So
probably lots of different tactics.
Great. So are these two tactics happening in other spider species, or are there additional tactics for combating female cannibalism? Because this has been going on for millions of years. And so chances are lots of things have popped up in the evolutionary record. And it would be interesting to see what has been so far successful in being able to propagate as much DNA as possible before being munched up as a post-copulatory snack.
And if I've heard you right, they give more of a donation, I'll say, the more cannibalistic the female appears to be. So I'm not kink shaming any spider, but it seems like then a self-fulfilling destiny, if you will, that they will
cannibalism and the delivery.
If that's what the female spider wants, then he's encouraging her bad behavior.
So that's the question. Does she want more volume of sperm? Because she might not if she has multiple copulations with multiple individuals throughout a mating season, let's say, right? That it might not matter to her. She might get all of her eggs fertilized no matter what. Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
So that's
it's definitely, though, the survival, the males that survive, the tactics that they use are potentially the tactics that go on to survive. And so larger deliveries and whatever tactics they happen to be, looking for the bigger palp or not.
And so, but then also, isn't it like all of these must be naive little male spiders?
Some naive,
like
some not.
The females be like, oh yeah, I've eaten several males this season, and the little guy spiders, oh, I've never even seen a lady before. Wow, isn't she pretty? Oh yeah, let's talk a while, shall we? Here, try this.
They're
What's
just
this?
under
It's
hormonal
wine.
control.
There's not alcohol in this, is there? Oh no, sweetie, you'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Some males do survive, though, and that is the interesting tactic as well. That's why this is interesting.
The
males do survive.
They survive once, okay?
Or more.
You think they're surviving a second time? Oh no, I wouldn't bet on it.
This reminds me of one of my very first stories I brought to the Animal Corner over a decade ago now,
Yeah.
was about this, but in black widow spiders, and how males will avoid cannibalism by tearing off their own pedipalp and leaving it inside of the female. And we had a whole conversation about whether that would be beneficial to him or not, because if he can't copulate anymore, then there's no benefit to him surviving evolutionarily, right? So, so there's a whole theory that it's because it provides a plug so that other males cannot then copulate with the female.
Yes.
But,
And it also, but that
And
also,
then that
you
would
know,
be the sperm competition
may
aspect.
underscore that spiders do have a much deeper inner life than we imagine in those extra days on the planet.
Sure. Yeah. Eating some more mosquitoes, doing good work. Anyway, spiders, their pedipalps, and sexual cannibalism, fascinating. It will not be the last you hear from me about this, and I cannot wait for more research. And that is the Animal Corner tonight.
Thank you so much. And we are looking forward to many more spider mating stories, cannibalistic spider mating stories to come in the Animal Corner. Justin, what kind of stories do you have for us right now?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know. Okay. So there's like this weird thing. There's this weird thing that it's actually a big percentage of the population. It's something like 20% of people have this strange response to the sound of somebody else eating or smacking of lips, that sort of thing. Researchers have identified parts of the brain involved in here as misophonia, a condition associated with an extreme aversion to certain sounds. The results from Ohio State University scientists suggest that one popular explanation of what causes misophonia. We're just intentionally turning off 20% of the audience. Intentionally. Listen, you don't know what you're doing. Individuals with misophonia feel anger, disgust.
Oh, I'm sorry, everyone.
I'm so sorry.
And a desire to flee when they hear
we're done.
these
I
sounds.
promise. I won't do it anymore. I'm sorry.
Chewing, eating, lip smacking, similar mouth noises are most often associated with the condition. Previous studies suggest that misophonia is caused by supersensitive connections between the brain's auditory cortex and the orofacial motor cortex areas, those related to the face and mouth. This new study, for the first time, examines what happens in the brain when people tapped their fingers repeatedly, which is another sound that can trigger some people with misophonia. I'm picturing the clicking also of a pen, like some people I know.
That kind of sound could wear on you.
Yeah.
Sure.
But they found that the patterns of the brain connectivity when finger tapping regions were different in people with misophonia compared to patterns of connectivity with chewing regions. So what they're basically saying is that, well, they basically found in doing these fMRI studies is that it's not the motor neurons or motor cortex neurons, whatever, of the oral facial area itself that are recording this as well. So study involved, it's a small sample size, 19 adults who had fMRI scans on their brains while they performed various tasks, all completed 3 questionnaires that measured their level of misophonia. Based on these results, levels participants ranged from none to mild. They had tasks where they vocalized syllables, and it showed which regions of the brain were activated by speech production, which overlaps considerably with the oral facial movement, and thus is connected to sounds like chewing. Participants also tapped their fingers on their legs repeatedly in a separate part of the experiment to make another movement connected with misophonia. In addition, participants were scanned with MRI when they were doing nothing. Results showed when they were at rest, participants who scored higher for misophonia did show stronger connections between auditory cortex and motor control area, just as the previous study had shown. But when participants were actually using their mouths to produce sounds, a different region of the brain was active, and this region showed no stronger connections and those high misophonia when compared to those with low. So what previous researchers identified as the orofacial region, they're involved in mouth and face movements, may not actually be the orofacial region at all. There was no connection to the auditory cortex at all. The important connection was the insula.
The insula.
Is that a part of the brain, Kiki?
It is. It is.
Oh.
The insular cortex, the insula. Yes.
Yeah, so it says this provides additional evidence that misophonia isn't about chewing and other mouth noises at all. It's just that those noises are triggering a part of the brain that people find really annoying. We have actual evidence in the brain of people that dislike sounds that aren't from
the
just
part of the
mouth and
brain.
face.
It's just triggering the annoyance part of the brain. It's just the wires go straight there. Doorbell, doorbell, doorbell.
But I guess this, what was it called? The insular cortex?
Yeah, the insula.
Is linked to strong emotions, including disgust.
Yes.
Is thought to be sourced there. So that explains a little bit, at least, of why some people are really annoyed by this. Hey, did you know that sugar isn't bad for you? But it can kill you.
What?
Yes. Well, that's because, like anything else in life, moderation is the difference between something that is harmless at one quantity and could be dangerous at another. High
like
consumption of sugar. Oh, yeah, you can die from over drinking water. Absolutely. Yeah. It's also called drowning. Yeah. It's also a way to do that. High consumption of sugar has been linked to an increased risk to a host of health issues. Food and beverage companies want you to feel like their products are safe and label products with reassuring claims about sugar content, like without added sugar or less sweet. Consumers rightly interpret such claims to mean the product is healthier than it actually is. There's another type of labeling, one unlikely ever to be seen in America, because for some reason, labeling foods is so wrought with lobbyists in America. But the type of labeling is called Nutri-Score, which is showing up on European products to inform consumers about the overall nutritional quality of food products. Previous research shows that the Nutri-Score can indeed guide consumers to make healthier food purchases. Kristen Jürgenbeck and colleagues at the University of Göttingen, Germany, published a study in the open access journal PLOS ONE examining how the Nutri-Score fared against typical, sort of call it vague or implied claims in advertising for sugary products, or about the sugar content, I guess. Advertising sugar claims. They conducted an online survey of 1,103 German participants. The survey asked participants for their perceptions after being presented with images of the packaging of 3 hypothetical products: instant cappuccino, chocolate muesli, and an oat drink. Oat drinks are a thing.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, is it just oat milk?
Yep.
No, it's not oat milk. It's not oat. It's oat. It's an oat drink.
Yeah, you can't call it milk. I know. What is
oat juice? Oat water.
Oat water.
I'll read you one of the oat drink ads. When you don't have time to sit for an oatmeal breakfast, try oat drink. Like a warm bowl of oatmeal you can drink on the go. Just the thing for busy moms, dads, and children too. Oat drink. Made from real oats, now with less sugar added. That sounds healthy, doesn't it?
Sure.
Survey results suggest that when a Nutri-Score was not present, claims about reduced sugar were successful in misleading participants into believing that hypothetical products were either healthier than they actually were or better for you. I guess that's the same thing. When Nutri-Score was listed, when that was added to the same labeling, it reduced the misconceptions about the less nutritional food. On the basis of these findings, researchers called for restricted use of sugar content claims and similar labels. as well as the mandatory use of Nutri-Score by companies that do make sugar claims. They also call for future research to evaluate the effect of Nutri-Score for additional food categories and in the context of other advertising claims that could mislead consumers about food healthiness. Authors add, nutrition or taste claims about sugar on the front of packages can improve the health perception of foods with poor health images.
Yeah, it's like when red vines or some other red licoricey type, candies say now with 0 fat. This is a non-fat food.
Yes.
It's like, it is, but the nutritional content of this food is all sugar. So,
all that sugar is going to turn into fat.
right. And so if there were a Nutri-Score involved,
Probably
that would affect the way that people actually take that non-fat food and take that into consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need Nutri-Scores here. Why don't we have Nutri-Scores? Why is it so hard to read a nutritional label? I don't understand.
It's on purpose. It's on purpose. It's on purpose.
It's because if you score
Sugar lobby.
food, if you score food, then you'd be giving a fair or you'd giving an unfair advantage to certain foods, and you'd
No, that's
unfair
not what anybody.
advantage to
That's
healthy
not what anybody.
foods.
Yeah, that's what they're concerned. The thing is, sugar is addictive, and it triggers a reward system. So by having a lot of sugar in your product, whatever it is, people will buy it more because they got rewarded by the sugar drug system in your brain. And so they're gonna and if you eat out where there are no labels, if you go out to some restaurant, there is so much salt and sugar in that food, unlike any meal you would prepare at home. Because they want you to enjoy your meal. So they just feed you full of sugar for that reward system to trigger.
I think it depends on what you're ordering at a restaurant, Justin. That's a strange one. The processed foods are the things that are chock-a-block with salt and sugar and other.
I bet you. You take your healthy night at a restaurant, ordering a pasta dish, say, or whatever the heck it is. Guarantee you're gonna have way more salt and sugar in that thing than if you made it at home. I don't know how to prove it though, and that's how they get away with it.
Way more.
Yeah, Dr. Kiki, is your new house haunted?
Did you hear that?
No, but we
you're
saw
just
you looking. We were just watching you like.
All of a sudden, there was a really loud noise, like somebody was being dragged across the floor above my head.
And nobody is there.
And then they're getting dragged back the other. I don't know what's happening up there. Oh, now I hear footsteps. The elephants are attacking. I don't know what's going on up there.
Well, we can't hear it on the mic.
Okay, good. All right. So we'll keep going without all of that facial distraction. Yes, this is This Week in Science. Moving on the heels of Justin's story here about the reward system, sugar, and nutritional information. And his story previous to that discussing the influence of the insula in misophonia. There's a comment in the chat room here that JG says there are a bunch of cool studies on how the insula plays a role in consciousness, that the anterior insula is called the gateway to consciousness. Well, the question still is, what is consciousness and how do we study it? We know we are conscious because, we have that saying, I think, therefore I am. And the fact that I can say that statement and understand it and know that I understand that is something I'm saying and that I understand it, and I can have an internal understanding of my experience and my own inner world. I know I'm conscious, but maybe Blair and Justin are robots. Maybe Blair and Justin are artificial intelligences. How do I know that they are conscious? Because they tell me they're conscious, right? Are you conscious currently?
Maybe.
You better believe it.
Maybe.
Or maybe I'm a robot with a recall on the run.
On the run. Well, some researchers this week have published their work in Frontiers in Psychology, which they hope brings together the worlds of physics, biology, and philosophy in the study of consciousness. And they have, in their paper, suggested that we need to address consciousness in the study of it as a relativistic phenomenon. So, in the same way that that we've talked about Alice and Bob in many situations, Alice is standing on a platform. Bob is on a train. The train rides away. From Bob's perspective, he's sitting stationary on a seat and Alice is moving away. But from Alice's perspective, she's standing stationary and Bob is moving away from her. So we approach a situation in physics with relativity. You have these two systems that are acting, that have actors acting relative to each other. So can we take that math? Can we take that understanding to apply it to the idea of consciousness, where we can only measure it through a related phenomenon of neural signals? I can measure Blair and Justin's brain signals potentially, and I can ask them questions about their consciousness, and I can read all those wiggly signals on a EEG printout or on a computer screen. But how do I know they are really conscious? This is just, it's a step removed. It's a representation of their consciousness. And so the only way that we can start to address consciousness and the real problem of consciousness and finding it within the brain is to look at it as a physics problem of relativity. You are relatively conscious compared to me.
I will.
So how do we
Justin
measure animal consciousness then?
Right. So the hope is that is the great question, because if we can start looking at this from this frame, we can potentially start seeing the most basic levels of consciousness and start defining what neural signals really do connect to consciousness, and then potentially start moving to different species and being able to, find signals that are very similar in other species as well.
I'm going to break the fourth wall here just for a moment. And I will admit candidly to you, you know who you are, because you're the one listening.
Yes.
You are the only conscious being on this planet. The rest of us are figments of your imagination.
Or are we? Right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, of course we're not. No, we're all real people out here in the world.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, we're not. Oh, boy. No. We're all other real people. It's not just all in your head.
According to their abstract, they say phenomenal consciousness, like a phenomenon, is neither private nor delusional, just relativistic. We're not figments. We're not delusions. We're just relative to your observation. Yes. And it all has to do with, the third observer, an outside observer situation.
As soon as they start doing that, then they're like, oh, yeah, that's because in quantum, that's this. Stop it. Stop trying to connect consciousness to quantum things that you're misunderstanding in the first place. Everybody who even understands what's taking place in the quantum third party observer act will tell you that it's not anything that any of you think it is. It's just you. We're all figments of your imagination. None of this is real.
It's really, in a sense, it is true, because our brain constructs everything in our living experience for us. So we are all a construct of our observers. Anyone observing you are a construct to them. Everything is a construct to you. To my brain,
All a bunch
is
of ticking
constructing
clocks.
this. Yes. Is it
Yeah,
real?
there's
It's
no
real enough.
guarantee that the light waves that hit your eyes are interpreted by your brain the same way they're interpreted by my brain, or the same smells are interpreted the same way, or any of our experiences are interpreted the same.
Right. And so that's one of the big issues with how do you find the neural trace of consciousness in a brain? Because every brain, even though there are big bits of it that are very similar, they're like a fingerprint, right? You know, the whorls and everything. Things, the neurons, my neurons are not going to be specifically connected in my brain the exact same way that your neurons are connected in your brain. I've had different experiences in my life than you have. What my experience of happiness is not necessarily your experience of happiness. And so if I say, I know I'm conscious because I'm happy, and both of you say, I know I'm conscious because I'm happy, and then we go and we look at our brains and we go, what is happy? What is the neural signal of happy? You're going to find different neural signals. There will be commonalities, but they're going to be different. So you're going to lose resolution in the search for the conscious trace within happiness, right?
Yeah,
And also,
maybe we're
like,
better off not knowing.
As we've discussed too, if Kiki, if we swapped brains, however that's possible,
Right.
or had the ability to read each other's minds telepathically, you and I.
Yes, connected.
I would get a bunch of words that I could read. You
Not
would just
images.
get a bunch of pictures. You would get a whole bunch of images that you would have to then make some sense out of why they are there.
But she could, because it would be your brain, so it'd be fine.
Well, no, I mean, but if we, I'm saying I had to swap that because that wouldn't.
And then I'd
we'd
be
just
like,
the
what's
other
that
person.
weird feeling in my left shoulder? And it would, it would
Why is
actually
it
be that
blue?
his
Why
body,
is it
his
green?
nose is itching, but my body
Yeah. So
and
no, we
his
can't
brain are
swap
not
brains
connected the
because then we
same.
would just have a different head on the. But no, if we would telepathically reading each other's thoughts, I think I'd have a better shot of understanding because I'd have a bunch of word association that I could play with because you think in words. But you would have a tougher job, I think,
Thinking images,
because you would get a lot of like, where is this hallway? What is this? I have all these. I have spatial places and I have physical objects. I have pictures of things. I don't have words, which is why I've always like been terrible speller. Can never remember a name. I can't see it. I don't see the words.
In this one case, you could read me like an open book.
But if I could, your mind, I could read like a word cloud.
Like a word.
Mine would be a collage of imagery.
I wonder if
beautiful pictures.
If like brain processing would be so much slower because you'd have to like
work it out.
Yeah. Even though you'd be reading something, your brain is not accustomed to functioning and thinking things up by reading, so it would still take longer than whatever your brain is used to doing.
Because I think if I can picture the word, I think that's what happens when I read like a book. So I think it would be quick, but it's very curious because you know how people say in a dream you can't read things? I have a hard time thinking of a word, seeing a word, just visualizing a word. It does the same thing it does in the dreams. It's like it's assembled and now it's gone.
Yeah, that's also complete nonsense because I read in my dreams all the time. So
no, I can't. And I have things that will come up like, oh, here's a map to where we're going. Okay, I'll just directions to where we're going. And oh gosh, oh yeah, that's right. I'm in a dream. I can't read any of this because it's a dream. What do I take and looking at anything written down for? So now Blair, you're a little bit of a hybrid because you say you think in pictures.
I do.
But you can read in dreams?
I can read in my dreams. It's no problem at all.
Wow. So you can visualize words.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot in any form, which is why I could do like in primary school when they start testing you, they have like, I don't know, what is the 8th grade, 7th grade test, or there's a big test in California somewhere where they test every kid. I got 99th percentile in English reading comprehension. Like almost a perfect score. Almost just knocked it completely out of the park. I think I missed like one question. My spelling was something atrocious, like 60, 54, 55%, something like that. It was like remedial, as though I could not read. And it's just, I have no memory for if that word looks close enough, I'm good. I'll just roll with it.
It's
I know
good
what
enough.
it
It's
means.
phonics, right? It's
I know what
close
they meant.
enough. It's
That's
good.
partially
It sounds
because
right.
English is
Sometimes
stupid.
sending out
But,
words.
Right.
So,
well, this
I
particular
noticed
study,
this that I
though,
can't proofread. I also can't proofread my writing because of this, because I can't tell the difference. Oh gosh.
Proofreading your own writing's hard anyway. You need somebody else to do that.
Okay.
But this particular study, though, they're trying to suggest that by bringing in this idea of relativistic phenomena in physics and developing a mathematical foundation, a formalization for consciousness that hopefully bridges this gap in the hard problem of consciousness, figuring out where it is, that maybe in the future, philosophers can usefully contribute to the science of consciousness in collaborations with neuroscientists to study the neural basis of these phenomenal structures. So potentially, maybe philosophers will finally be able to work with neuroscientists and come together through the common language of physics, which, if that can happen, that itself is solving a hard problem in the world of science.
I just feel like you don't need the hard science. I know everyone wants to attach cosmetic products to quantum physics science. Stop.
No, people want to know what's conscious. Is a rock conscious? I don't know. What is consciousness? Is it quantum? I don't know. People want to scientists ask the questions. Whether or not we have the tools currently or the understanding, we're working on it, slowly chipping away.
Philosophers want to be a hard science, but there's not a bridge. There's no
philosophy
parallel.
Philosophy
has a place. It's not
science.
Hard science.
Yeah. Anyway,
it led to a lot of hard science.
I think we've made it to the end of the show. We've made it. We made it to the end of the
Stop
show.
science shaming, Justin. Let's close out the show.
Let's close it out. Philosophy is a science. It is.
Attacking social science last week, philosophy this week. What are you up to?
No science shaming. No. We've come to the end of the show. Yeah.
Is considered science?
It's time. Are we done? We're done. Are we done now?
How
We're done.
that?
Yes. It's time.
Yeah,
hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode. We are so glad that you were here with us for the whole thing. I know you stayed for the whole thing, and I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to give shout outs to Fada for his help with social media and show notes over on YouTube. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. Gord, Arnlore, others, thank you so much for keeping it nice, compassionate in the chat room, keeping it real over there. Rachel, thank you so much for your editing and the work that you do. And thank you so much for our Patreon sponsors and their help in what they do in allowing us to do this show. Thank you to Teresa Smith, James Schaefer, Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazar, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tazi, Woody MS, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vigard, Chefstad, Hal Snyder, Jonathan Stiles, aka Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Garv Sharma, Reagan, Derek Schmidt, Don Mundus, Stephen Elberon, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredus 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kedden Ridden, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Beto for Texas, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramus, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie Paul Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, and Jason Roberts. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your support of TWIS on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting TWIS on Patreon, head to twis.org and click on that Patreon link. On next week's show, Actually, on
We will
tomorrow's
be-
show.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
We have a show tomorrow? What day?
I have an interview tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I will be speaking with Dr. Moiya McTier, and she has a book out about the Milky Way. I am very excited to be speaking with Dr. McTier about her work.
I heard about that. That's the galaxy that's really, really close to us.
Yeah, it's a close one. Everyone should have something that they find in common with that. But aside from tomorrow, Thursday, August 18th
We
at
will
11 a.m. Pacific time.
all be back here together,
Yes.
8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels, as well as twist.org/live.
Hey, want to listen to us as a podcast? Maybe as you walk around and take pictures of orb weaver spiders up to no good? Just search for This Week in Science where her podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to the stories so you can read them yourself will be available on our website, www.twist.org. And you can also sign up for our newsletter.
You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, into the subject line, or your email will grow its own consciousness and go away.
To Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We'll love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views. But I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just understand that we're not trying to threaten you.
You might understand. You might understand. It is the after show. What do you know? It's the after show. We did a very long show tonight.
We did. That was wild.
Yeah. Justin said he didn't get much sleep, and I would like to propose a scientific study of the length of shows and how those correlate to how tired Justin is. I would like to correlate these things. I have a hypothesis based on observations.
Yes.
Of many observations, longer shows with chatteriness. Though I'm tired as well, so I have a little bit less of the ability to keep things moving to the end of the show.
What was your last story that you deleted?
Oh, what was the story? Okay, so yeah, I deleted it because this show had been going on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But the let's see, the story was really about an idea called the free energy principle. And this is not an idea of like free energy machines that, just get energy from nowhere. That's not what it's about at all. It has to do with a neuroscientist back in the 1990s who had a whole bunch of data and wanted to figure out how to categorize it and was trying to figure out how to deal with lots and lots and lots of data. And then he realized that what he was doing in the categorizing of all this visual data, or the categorizing of all his data from like neuronal output, that's what the brain likely is doing when it's categorizing and processing visual data. And so there's all this stuff. And so he basically, it's like this theory of everything that he thinks, or that a group of people who've been working on it for the last couple of decades, they claim that it explains the behavior of the brain, the mind, and life itself. And really what it comes down to is that life doesn't like to be surprised, and it can minimize its energetic output and its ability to survive longer by minimizing surprises. And so I think the name is awful. The free energy principle, I think, is absolutely terrible for this
Yeah.
for this idea. But yeah, basically, it comes down to just how, like, if something is surprising, it's likely to take advantage of you, to kill you, to not necessarily be good for you. It's probably going to be dangerous. The ultimate surprise is death. Mwahaha. And so they, similar to the physicists who are addressing consciousness, they're trying to address all of this stuff in terms of statistics and probabilities and the probabilities of experience. It's also there's a lot of, I think, this kind of cross-disciplinary stuff coming together into it. And in this situation, free energy measures how improbable your experience would be if a certain unobserved situation were true. Minimizing free energy means choosing to believe in the unobserved situation that makes your observations least surprising. So it's kind of like the free energy principle. I think it could explain a lot of like weird beliefs by people. Because you're like, well, I observed all these things, and to make my worldview fit, I'm going to believe this other thing over here that somebody else said. So I don't know. Perhaps it explains several not necessarily personally beneficial choices that people make, and the ideas that people have related to information in their world and how they're going to use it. Our beliefs in only things that we can observe or have observed. I haven't seen that happen myself. How could that? I don't know. But it's a really weird principle or theory of everything, because it's kind of like, nobody wants to be surprised about stuff. Of course, life doesn't want to be taken by surprise. It explains a lot of things that are happening in terms of stuff. But I mean, is it so duh, that should it be a principle? Or is it just like, well, of course that's how it works. I don't know. Is it even is it even helpful is the question.
Well, isn't that how humor works?
The
to an
surprise
extent,
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the reason you laugh at a good punchline is because it kind of makes sense that it should be there, but it surprised you from the setup. You
Yeah.
didn't think that would be the punchline kind of a thing. So
Mhm.
maybe that I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of like
There's too
psychological
many
things where it's
things.
like, yeah, it's like the psychological stuff you can like go, oh, I can see how that could apply to it. But then when you start getting into other aspects of just biology and how life works, how evolution works, like they're positing this life doesn't like surprises theory as like it explains everything about life. And it's like,
Well,
at a
okay,
certain
but
level, yes, but like, is that useful?
so
Is this something that scientists can
wait,
use to produce their models that they base their, their studies on? Like,
what it would indicate, if true, that it would indicate that biological life is a highly structured system.
indeed.
Wow, that's just mind-blowing, isn't it, when you think about it? Gosh, what if that were true?
Yeah. Yeah. What I need, I guess, for
one
this.
that doesn't do well, one that also would not fare very well with a high error rate in, say, transcription. Yeah, that would also indicate that. Oh,
why would
gosh,
you do
what if
that?
that were true? That can't. Oh, that would change nothing. That's what I understand already, isn't it? Like, hey, I've got a
have
theory
a
about
system
everything.
that tries to get rid of those errors. I mean,
I've got my own theory of everything. You know what it is?
what?
Everything. That's my theory. Everything. That is the whole theory. You just
And
take
that's the kind of resolution, right?
And
Everything.
that's the theory. Oh, what do you got? Oh, that's something, the words that you said? Yeah, that's part of it. Why? Because the theory is everything. And the things that you just said is something, which is in everything. I don't know. Again, there's a gap between philosophy. It's not a narrow gap. What I'm trying to say. It's not like this time
this was
it's not orbiting and maybe they'll someday collide. No. You're talking about an electron that's spinning around a different atom in a completely different part of the universe, and they're not entangled. Their root constituents may be identified as the same things as in terms of what we have identified as the origin of, say, matter. Then they diverged and have yet to, and ne'er shall they. But they're going to try because that's their job. Their job is to try to make them relevant. One of the greatest philosophies I've ever encountered is
can't wait for this one.
Is ancient Sufi learning stories.
Oh, okay.
And they're kind of parables, and they're kind of some of them are like very humorous, allegorical kind of things, but they always, you walk away from reading with this, go, oh yeah, they're observations about humanity and human thinking and human interaction and how people perceive things from different perspectives and all of this. And that is philosophically, Sufism is in many levels has claims of spirituality and that sort of thing. But on just how basic human perception and interaction, wisdom, I guess, how wisdom works, how a collection of observations of human behavior can be utilized and applied. That is an important thing.
Mhm.
Is it a hard
Yeah.
science? No. No, it's not. It's impressive. It's useful. Existentialism. I love, oh gosh, Nietzsche is one of the funniest human beings on the planet. He's, I don't know if I'd put him on the same level as Socrates. Socrates was the Larry David of his day. He was making comedic observations that are belly roll laughing and cringeworthy at the same time.
That's what I learned from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
He's hilarious. Socrates is hilarious.
Oh, great.
Nietzsche is very dry and sarcastic and also very humorous. Neither of them are doing hard science. Nothing Nietzsche ever did or said is going to lead to an understanding of
slow. It's a slow.
Physics.
No. But this is the thing: is how philosophy has led to the development of logic, and because of the development of logic, we have been able to develop testable ideas that enabled us to develop the ideas
when was that
for science.
Wait, and when was
philosophy?
How long ago?
Thousands of years ago. Yes. But philosophy as a science with logic at its root. As who was it? Derek Schmidt was saying, I couldn't believe how much math was in Philosophy 101. There's a lot of math. You have to do proofs. It's all about proving your theorems. So you have a theory about consciousness, you have to prove it. You got it. And so
there's philosophy in statistics. When you're reading your statistics and you're trying to figure out what relevance is.
Philosophy of science. So why do we do science the way that we do? How do we do it the way, not just methods, but the reasoning and the logic behind science is still an ongoing field of study and debate. So philosophy, we need it. It's important. And it is a science.
I think it's great for self-improvement.
It's not just, no, yes, you are science shaming.
I am not science shaming. I love philosophy. I have read everything Nietzsche, every word Nietzsche has written, even the stuff that was edited by his right-wing brother-in-law. I've read
his brother-in-law.
It was. He had this right.
I know.
He had a brother-in-law in Germany who was kicked out of the German school system. He was a teacher. Got kicked out because he was far too right-wing for the German schools. This is I don't know, it was the late 1800s or something like this. Nietzsche died, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra and a couple of other books, I think, were edited by him and Nietzsche's sister, mostly by him. So Nietzsche starts to get this really strange vibe in that book that he doesn't have anywhere else, and they eventually figure out, oh, his right-wing brother-in-law edited the book before it was published. Okay, that's why the tone isn't as free-spirited and humorous and self-reflective and honest. Self-honesty is such a crazy thing to do. And Aldous Huxley, I've read everything Aldous Huxley ever wrote. I think he's a wonderful philosopher about life and perspective and things like this too. However,
but you're approaching it as content,
literature.
Not as a science. Yes, you're approaching it as literature and not as the science that it is. The literature is an output. It is the result of the thinking and the science that has been developed. But anyway, philosophy.
I mean, I guess it's in STEAM, but I wouldn't call it STEM. Is that fair?
No.
Should we?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't put it in arts? You wouldn't put philosophy in part of arts?
No.
Philosophy is math?
STEAM.
I want to see
science, history, technology.
How much math I want to know how much.
engineering,
Let's go. Somebody
arts,
pull up one of those
strength.
lists of the classes you got to take to get a degree. Let me see how much hard math you actually have to have.
You
to
keep
get that
using these
philosophy
words
degree.
hard and soft. Like, I don't like it. I've never liked these.
Because you can get math class credits in a college for watching a video presentation on fractals. Like there's workarounds for a math class fill-in.
That sounds like
is math
pretty
related.
soft.
Yeah, there's some pretty soft math classes you can take in college to have math as part of a degree versus dealing with something like complex numbers. I'm not judging because I can't do any of it. But my point, because I was a philosophy major at one point. This is how I know. It's not a science. You know, you can replace any good philosopher with a good sophist or rhetorician, which you could say is philosophy because it's critical thinking and logic and argument.
Right. Yes.
But it's still, I would keep that a craft of art.
Intellect.
Intellect is a craft of art.
Okay, now I'm seeing where you're coming from a bit better finally in where your perspective is formed.
I'm not discounting it. I was there. I know what I speak. There was not a lot of hard scientists or there were not a lot of even necessarily science believers in philosophy classes. This is not what attracted them to philosophy.
I'm just saying, I'm seeing a pattern of a
I would put psychology
way of
a lot of psychology
judging fields of study that I don't appreciate because I'm just saying you have this take this week and then you had the take on social science last week and I think you just it would behoove you to recognize that there is some really important and influential work in those fields that impact science as a whole, and to call it a soft science and to act like it's less important
it's all important.
First of all, it's insulting to people who have PhDs in those areas and people who
I don't think it is.
It definitely is. I know people with PhDs in social science who find it extremely insulting when people dismiss their scientific background because it's the wrong kind of science.
It is,
and it's a really important part of science. Extremely important. Lack in social science is part of the reason that science is not accepted well in society.
May I defend myself for one moment? The intersection.
Because you have been unable to speak until now, so definitely take a moment now.
Well, I want to focus on the intersection at which my complaint originates.
Take the harder soft option. Yes.
The attempt to bring in physics terminology to a philosophical conversation about consciousness. It's as though it has that feeling that, a philosopher is also, therefore, somebody who can give medical advice. Because there's a medical basis for our philosophy.
I feel like you're using a slippery slope kind of...
It is a slippery slope, and it's more than a slippery slope. It's attempting... Very rarely does what I would call a hard science, and it's fair. Like there's gradations in different sciences, but very rarely does a hard science go. And what we really need to understand the biology of this animal and the function of these enzymes within the liver is to understand the philosophical implications of having enzymes within one's like nobody's trying to create there's an existential
but biology enzymes, unless they're being looked at from a probabilistic model of likelihood of catalyzing a chemical reaction, it's not considered a hard science. Biology is a soft science. Psychology is a soft science. Unless you are specifically using math, numbers, if the numbers are tangible, things are tangible, they're not intangible. Psychology is considered, social sciences are considered soft sciences because very often you're dealing with opinions, trying to come at questions that are actually very hard to answer
They
because
can be.
they're difficult to study. How do you study them? Maybe you can get towards an answer though. It's all very important, and soft sciences are actually very difficult because how do you study language acquisition in a bird? How do you ask a bird whether it's conscious? How
You know what else is a lot of guesswork and a lot of opinions? Paleontology,
Yes.
anthropology.
The study of
it's not
human
that it's
evolution.
guesswork. A study of evolution, but it's not
Now it's
guesswork.
more
And in fact-
numbers, but it used to be
No, it's
all
not even.
bones.
It's a similar educated
Perfect.
guess framework based on
Okay.
statistics, which is
Well,
how a
it's
lot
not
of these
just
soft
statistics,
sciences
no.
also work.
So you gave a perfect example, and I will tell you that there is no other science. There's no science other than anthropology, or that has done more than anthropology in dispelling philosophical beliefs of cultures, religions,
Yes.
philosophy,
Biological anthropology. Yes.
all of the things
Okay.
that people, all the philosophers who created eugenics and who created all these philosophers who thought their way into how the world was constructed, anthropology has rebuffed, has told them their origin stories
was
are
a big
incorrect.
problem for a while, but
Their origin stories, I don't care what culture it is, everybody's origin story, their oral tradition, their oral history is incorrect. There's physical evidence that
Right, but
refutes
to
where they
Kiki's
think they
point,
came from.
anthropology for a long time talked about how there were racial differences in the skull.
So anthropology
So
started, correct. No, anthropology started as a philosophy. And what anthropology as a field began as, archaeology, I more correctly. Actually, at first it was, the first step of archaeology was really more about collecting treasure from dead people. In the very, very beginning. Trophy
rich
hunting,
people traveling
Yeah.
to far off places and collecting stuff.
Then it became a mechanism. It became a mechanism for philosophy. Go out and find me the proof that there was this ancient German noble culture, Hitler said, that pre-existed, that was great and noble, just like they had in Greece and just like they had in India, just like they had in Italy, that we just like the Egyptians, like go back to the Egyptian times in Germany and find our ancient noble culture. And what they found was people living in mud huts while the pyramids had stood for thousands of years, people cooking over open pit fires while the Parthenon was being built. What they found didn't add up. And the anthropologists, who were archaeologists, who were hired, who were told expressly to go find us evidence of our ancient noble culture, came back proudly with mud huts and open pit fires and were told that's not good enough.
It's not good enough.
That's not what we told you to do.
No.
But for a long time, that field was, here's what we believe, go out and find the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And it did a bad job at it because it would collect it and say, oh, let's interpret it this way if we must. And then over time, as data comes in, everybody's belief, I don't care what culture, I don't care where in the planet, what religion, what community, oral tradition you had, anthropology has refuted it at some point. So I would say that's a very hard science. And the tools that they use today are cutting edge chemistry and everything else to do the dating techniques, the lasers being shot from drones to see through the foliage of South America. I mean, it's a hard science.
Okay,
today.
but you understand what you are saying is an opinion that you hold, right?
No, these are facts. So
no, that this is a hard science and it is more hard than other sciences. This is an opinion that you hold.
Yes, because of the evidence is physical. The tools being used are getting beyond human bias, beyond human opinion, beyond even regular the five senses that we use, to use the tools of science to get those sixth senses that we could not observe, cannot observe, and use that data to create the picture. Now, does that mean that it started in philosophy? Yes. When? A long time ago. What has philosophy added to anthropology successfully?
I don't know, because I haven't studied the philosophy of anthropology, which I'm sure there is a discipline.
So I brought it on the show.
I'd love to know. Maybe
Okay, I have one example.
Philosophy Talk is a great program on it's a podcast. Philosophy Talk is a good one if you want to. They talk about all sorts of stuff.
Years ago on the show, I did an example of a philosophy / archaeologist fella. It was working at a university, and he published a paper about why current modern humans had an advantage over Neanderthals. And he used examples of the cave paintings and the artwork, which requires hand-eye coordination. And because our lineage of ancestor had these skills and our comprehension levels must have been much higher. Our hand-eye coordination required to make them must have been really refined. And that gave a great advantage over us. Now, this is a philosophy arts major who was interpreting cave art and giving the philosophical view. That paper came out. And within the same week, because I had both papers to talk about that same night, they discovered that some of the cave art that he was describing was made by Neanderthals, which they figured out because they measured the amount of uranium in the crust covering some of the paintings, which separates from thorium as rainwater moves it through. The thorium stays behind, and the uranium particles get moved by the water and deposited, and their half-life is separate from any thorium, and that's how they could date it specifically back to before current modern humans were there. That's awesome. A hard science that anthropology used that completely refuted the arts philosophy major's interpretation of current or modern humans.
But
you have to start
we had the wrong being.
But you start somewhere.
But that's also based on a timeline that we currently agree is accurate. But that timeline is also constantly changing. So you're still making assumptions based on current information. But it is about something that is actually unknowable. There are parts of evolutionary history that are unknowable because the fossil record will never be complete.
True.
No, but I think you're disregarding the amount of information they have now, along with artifacts and layers.
I'm not.
DNA
I'm just saying it's not.
I mean, they have a hard science behind it, not an art philosophy major.
And again,
interpreting cave
you are
art.
making a qualitative decision about a type of science. Based on a type of data.
The crux of the discussion, the crux of the debate here is the discussion that we're having is that when you imply that some science is hard and some science is soft, you are implying that the implication is that the soft science is lesser. It's less important, it's less influential, it's less impactful as a whole.
It's less real. It's less measurable.
Yeah.
And it's not just.
I don't think I'm saying that. I think I'm saying don't keep trying to connect it to a hard science. Let them be separate.
It's science. It's just science studying different things. And that's what we're saying is that we don't need to keep perpetuating hard versus soft.
But I'm not the one doing it. It's the philosophy majors who wish they were physicists who keep trying to do that. I'm not doing it. Be a philosopher. I think
an
it's great.
assumption that you're making right now.
That's not. But the reality is,
there have been so many attempts at it.
We should really be looking at
especially with
philosophy
consciousness.
as science's consciousness. Philosophy is the science of sciences, so it really is the consciousness of science. So
misinterpretation of the observer effect, misinterpretation of the quantum eraser, and all of the papers about consciousness and interconnectivity that have spewed forth as a result of not having gotten it in the first place because you didn't study it, but wanting to connect the thing you didn't have to do math for to a thing that is all complex numbers all the way down.
So, quote unquote, hard scientists are connecting findings to things that they're not an expert in constantly. Constantly.
Yeah.
How many times do I bring roboticists in who want to make decisions about implications for the animal kingdom, or like just crazy off base places where people are reaching over the aisle into areas that are not their expertise? That's part of what science is. Not always.
Collaboration.
Often not. In fact, that's often what I will complain about on this show, is someone coming into a space without the historical information or without the collaboration to be able to understand the implications of what they're doing. And so this is not a strictly soft science problem. This happens within the what you want to call hard sciences all the time, where people are trying to draw conclusions that are kind of quote unquote outside their lane, which, like, that's part of what's cool about science, is going, oh shoot, I was studying this thing, but it might have an implication for this whole other field. Let's look at that.
Mm-hmm. I do think that the story about the story about consciousness, though, that I brought, I mean, it really does get at that, because it's, physicists or people coming in and saying we need physics to look at consciousness. And there have been other through the past several years. I can remember there was one young up and coming physicist who got like a bunch of media and like someone gave him a bunch of PR for his kind of theory on human evolution and how all of human evolution could be explained through physics. And
was it
thermodynamics or something like that?
Was it thermodynamics? I thought, or was it the quantum wiggling affecting the gene code to account for all mutations?
But see, there's like a whole bunch.
But it was just quantum vibration would eventually kick out a nucleotide, and then that's where mutation comes from.
So I think, when you are addressing, whatever your science is, and you start thinking about things from a logical, intellectual frame and trying to apply what you know to other aspects of science, a physicist or a philosopher thinking about consciousness, suddenly it is the general practice of the application of knowledge. And so this is philosophy, physics, all of it, neuroscience, whatever. It's all on the same playing field. People are accumulating knowledge, using their intellects to apply that and try and figure out new things. This is how philosophy is in there, even now.
And that philosophy originated how many thousands of years ago, and
Justin
changed.
Comes in for the last word, saying something he said before.
Hey, do you remember when I was looking at my geometry textbook? It was like $140 for a geometry textbook. How is that possible? That was invented 8,000 years ago, and nothing's changed.
Much of it by philosophers.
Yeah.
And they were right. Isn't that amazing?
Why is the textbook still $140?
Why is my biology textbook that teaches me about Gregor Mendel and the Punnett square still $200? That's science, man.
Science. It's expensive textbooks.
Yeah.
You too can do science. Dropping hundreds of dollars on textbooks
Yeah,
that
although-
they now make you print, apparently. And I don't know, they're all PDFs. I don't even understand
that's what I was about
anymore.
to say is I am bummed that I went to college before Amazon, but also before like good internet, like used textbook trading sites, and more
Yeah.
specifically PDF versions of books, because now you can like Control F for things in a textbook, which is
Hey,
just
that's cheating. That means you're not reading it.
You're searching efficiently?
listen.
Using
I
modern
have a
technology?
bachelor's.
You're skipping to the
I have a
relevant-
bachelor's in
relevant-
zoology, and I don't think I actually read in a complete chapter in a textbook after freshman year. I don't learn from textbooks. I learn
I
from
don't think you're
lectures.
supposed to
I
s-
learn
Yeah,
from like,
no,
you know, like doing things and talking through things in office hours. And I just towards the end, I don't think I even bought my textbook my senior year because I was
Man.
like, this is a waste of money. I don't use the textbook.
I
I
still
did know
have all
one
my
guy.
textbooks, especially from graduate school. I think I read them all cover to cover.
Oh my god.
I was so
part
into
of why I
reading
didn't
my
go to
textbooks
graduate
in grad school.
Friggin' textbook.
I know a
Read
guy.
all this.
I knew a guy who I won't say his name because I don't know if this reflects poorly. He never bought any of his textbooks. This was also somebody who could do all of the like chemistry equations in his head. He had he was like pretty darn smart and self-studied enough too on top of it. But he was like, yeah, I don't read the textbooks because they are the remediary versions of what I've been reading.
What you've
elsewhere.
been
So,
doing
wherever
for the
I-
show.
yeah.
What you already know. Yeah.
Oh,
What you
no,
found.
not-
what you
this
find
is
on
not-
your
yeah.
own.
No,
You're
no,
like,
this
I
is
know
not
how I
me.
can
This is
find
definitely not
better.
me. I am like, I read the textbook and I remembered nothing. And then I sleep with the book under the pillow. Didn't work.
No.
And then I get the PDF and I download it and I play the audio. Oh God, I can't read. That's what it is. I play the audio of it. I do the Control Alt.
What you
and
need are
then,
picture books.
No, it's the pictures. And I actually the audio version. When I listen to the information, I remember it way better than if I read it.
I hope that's
I might
everybody
not
who
be able
just
to.
listened
I might not
to
be
this
able to read.
very long show.
Is it possible that
Just
I
an
don't know how to
auditory
read and just
learner.
didn't?
You're not. Yeah, you prefer auditory information, maybe.
Oh, what's
How
this?
is
A
that
field of
possible?
psychology? A soft science?
Oh.
Yeah. Don't even get me started. If half or more of your experiments cannot be reproduced, it's not a hard science. In fact, if it's less
Well,
than
then-
50%, I might suggest it isn't a science at all.
I would actually. So I have a big question. Physics has had a preprint server, the archive.org, for decades. Like, it's been around for a long time. Biology only recently got preprint servers. I'm wondering if some of the publication issues with not just retractions, but studies not being able to be replicated in biology, if that will be, and in psychology and these sciences that never had preprint journals, preprint archives before, if that's gonna be better, if it's going to become less of a problem moving forward, because there will be more time for discussion, for debate, for looking at problems in the data, looking at the study, and for basically the community to talk about what scientists have done before they actually go and get it peer reviewed and published. I wonder if it'll make it better.
Yeah, because if it is, if there's not been enough time for enough of the people in the know to have read it and reviewed it, right? What I'd be interested to see
that input.
Here we go too. What science experiments? What experiments in psychology? What percentage of experiments in psychology are sent to a clinical trial registration site.
Mm.
How many of them are actually registered ahead of publication? What percentage? Because I don't know.
Usually they don't have to be unless they are. I mean, a clinical trial is a clinical trial. It doesn't have to be registered unless they're trying to do do something to affect treatments or impact patients.
Right.
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 So
because the issue there is, if you have, look, you can do 30 different experiments and one hits and you publish it. If they weren't registered, nobody knows you did 29 experiments and published one of them. If you were registering them ahead of time, they know you did. They can see you've done 30 of this experiment and only published one.
Yeah, so registering studies ahead of time is also starting. There are databases popping up, not just for clinical trials, but for studies where researchers who are doing all sorts of studies can register their study. They register how they're going to do it, so like the sample sizes and the statistical tests they're planning to do on the data after the fact. So they register all of those details up front so that people can go, no, you shouldn't do that, even before they get started. So it can actually influence the scientific. This is actually underway right now. This is happening.
Alzheimer's research.
Yeah.
There's a big story out there that is too big and complicated for me to take on today. Of a researcher who the stickiness of the platelets involved in Alzheimer's disease that the last 16 years has dedicated tens of millions of dollars into researching cures looks to have been fabricated. Looks to have been fabricated. Do you know what would have prevented this from getting this far? Justin Jackson's null result journal. And the reason it would have been helpful
because it could have been published, whatever it was.
Several prominent labs attempted to redo this study and failed. And they didn't publish because they had no result.
Or they had, it wasn't that they had no result. They had kind of conflicting results, because there's this this thought that this protein that's involved, that it like shifts, it recombines with other proteins. And so you get like these complexes, and it kind of depends on when you test it and how you test it as to what you're actually, results you actually get.
And
so
the methods,
it's complicated, but
But in following the methods that were listed as having been followed to make the discovery in the first place, several prominent research labs attempted and failed to find the same thing. Now, had they been able to publish all of those in the null result, you would say, hey, here's 5 different huge labs that know what they're doing, full of smart people doing a hard science, and they can't get that keystone important research that's been cited thousands of times and has been the cornerstone of 16 years and tens of millions of dollars of research now. They couldn't reproduce it. And if you had a null result, you would have been able to have a collection of, oh gosh, there's a problem here getting that result. And then guess what? There's a couple of labs that did find the result. And now you have to question, did they?
Well, like I said, they might have, because of how they measured it and what they did, but it could have been,
Right now,
I'm putting a link to an article in the conversation that would be very good to read.
I want to say University of Chicago, but that's probably wrong. We had a guest. I think it was University of Chicago. I can't remember his name because I'm terrible with names. I don't remember words. But he was working on Alzheimer's, and one of the things that he was discussing was the ratio of an enzyme or a messenger RNA, and it wasn't combining or something like that, that didn't sound anything at all like sticky platelets in his description of the Alzheimer's problem. I'm wondering, I want to go back and find that episode because I'm like, because it sounds so different than this failed research, this faked research that they've been trying to attempt. It sounded like he had identified it as such a different problem, or such a different scenario than that, you know, that evil sticky thing, but it had to do with a ratio of maybe an enzyme being able to get in and find a matching protein to do its work on. That I wonder if that work didn't get funded as well as it maybe should have, because there was already this preconceived notion.
There's an article in Science that talks about that a bit, about how there was kind of like how, and this is an issue in science generally, you know, like how the majority of the field is going to determine a lot of where the funding decisions lie, where most of the money is going to go, because things look more promising than others and all of that. But yeah, there's some good stuff out there. Good things. I think we need to call it an end. Blair's going to faceplant on her desk pretty soon.
Oh, no. Hey, say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good morning, Justin.
Good morning, Justin. Good night, Kiki.
Good night, everyone. I look forward to seeing you again next week. And I hope some of you can make it for tomorrow at 11 a.m. Dr. Moiya McTier. Stay well, stay healthy, stay curious.
Chat